So this is our agenda for today. Okay, so we'll first talk a little bit about how we can configure Xray with your Jira instance. Okay, then we'll go through the process of the complete workflow of defining a new feature for our projects, defining test cases for that feature, talk about preconditions, organizing test cases in a flat and hierarchical view, and then we'll talk about test plans and what those are and what are the main purposes for test plans. Then we'll execute test cases, both manual and automated test cases. And then we'll talk about the reporting capabilities of Xray and also talk about some of the integrations that are possible with Xray today, including, of course, Exporter. Okay, so let me jump back here to my demo instance here. So, as you probably know, Xray is a test management app for Jira that allows you to create tests and other related artifacts as Jira issues. Okay, so when Xray is installed, it installs an additional 5 issue types to your Jira instance, and those issue types will be basically to create test cases, organize test cases, plan executions, and so on. A quality assurance solution as a Jira app allows a seamless integration between the QA, the development, and the project management teams. So one of the most important features of Xray is the ability to provide the test coverage visibility for requirements based on the test results, thus taking advantage of this integration between Xray and Jira. So let's now talk about how you can configure Xray with your Jira projects. Okay, so there are basically two fundamental configurations. And this is also related with how Xray works here and the integration it has with Jira. So you can, of course, configure your projects for tests and for executions and for all of the other Xray artifacts. Okay, just, of course, Xray installs these issue types, but you need to configure them in your project in order to start using tests, create test sets, test plans, and so on. Okay, so this is one of the configuration aspects. You need to configure the Xray issue types in your project. The second way to configure a project is for requirement coverage. Okay, so you can also configure a project so that Xray can provide visibility of the testing status right within your user stories. Okay, and as I said previously, this is one of the most important features here in Xray. So, of course, it takes advantage of being in Jira and having the user stories and the epics and on all your requirements, all your defects right within Jira. So, and because we are having also the test cases in Jira, so why not relate both of them and provide these requirement coverage reports that basically immediately tell you the status of your project in terms of testing, okay? And based on these two types of configurations, there are also many scenarios in which you can organize your projects, okay? So let's jump back here to our documentation, where you can see this section related with project organization. I'll just explain to you two different ways that you can organize projects. Okay, so the first way is to configure all in the same project. So you might have already projects working with user stories, bugs, tasks, and some of the other features. So you can also, of course, integrate the Xray issue types within this project. Okay, so you'll have basically all within the same project. Another approach is to separate the tests or the testing artifacts that are provided by Xray and separate them of the requirements and defects that you already have. So you can leave your project as it is, so your requirements project, where you have the user stories, epics, bugs, and so on, and just create a separate pair project that will be just a project for quality assurance. So it will contain all of the Xray entities. So these are just the two most common ways to organize projects in Jira with Xray. And of course, the one to choose is entirely up to you. So it is possible with Xray to have these entities separated by different projects, and Xray has no problem whatsoever in terms of that. Okay. We also have some other scenarios here in our documentation. Please make sure you read this part if you're starting with Xray. It will help you getting started with how to organize projects here and the testing entities provided by Xray. So I will now show you how you can configure particular projects with Xray. So let's say I have a project here that is not yet configured with Xray, okay? And then I'm just going to show you how you can do that. So if you are using a project already and you need to add the Xray issue type, screens, and custom fields and all of that into that project that you are working right now, you just go to the actions. You just need to go to the project settings of your project. Of course, you need to be a project administrator. You need to go to actions menu and then add Xray issue types. And this will add all of the Xray issue types, including screens and custom fields, and will configure everything up to you. Okay. And of course, you can also enable Xray requirement coverage for a specific project, because this requirement coverage capability is not enabled by default. You can just enable it for your project, and this will display a web panel specifically for you to see the status of your user stories in terms of testing. Okay. So these two settings are here on the project configuration, and you can use them to configure existing projects on your Jira instance. Of course, if you are starting from scratch and perhaps you want to separate the testing artifacts from your requirements, from your user stories and epics and so on, you can just create a new project. And for this, Xray will provide this Xray test project template. And this template, of course, includes, again, all of the Xray issue types and all of the screens and fields already configured. Okay. Another important setting that you might configure when you install Xray is really going to the global settings here of your Jira instance. Go also to the Xray settings. You'll have a page here called issue type mapping, and this is where basically you can associate and say which issue types in your environments are really requirements. So in my case, I have the epic, user story, new feature, and improvement over here, and which issue types are to be mapped as defects. I have the bug and sub-bug. Okay. So defect issue types will be the default issue type chosen by Xray. For instance, when you create a new defect from the execution screen, this will be the default issue type chosen by Xray. Okay, so let's now go back to our dashboard here. So we have a project here called a bookstore that we are going to use for this demo today. And we are now ready to start with the workflow process that we have prepared here for you. That will be basically creating a new feature for this bookstore that we have. We have some features already implemented here, but we'll create a new feature, create some test cases, talk about the different test types that Xray provides, then planning capabilities of Xray. Then we'll execute the test cases, talk a little bit about how Xray can integrate with continuous integration platforms. And then we'll talk also more at the end through the reporting capabilities that Xray has to offer. Okay. So let's now create our first user story. But I have a board here that I'm using here because this project is basically using Scrum and is using the Scrum board. So we have a sprint here, an ongoing sprint, and you can see here that we have some user stories already implemented. And you can also see that Xray is already providing some information here. So as you can see, this requirement status custom field is provided by Xray. And this custom field is associated with your requirements. So in my case, they are epics, user stories, and so on. And it provides you the latest execution result based on the test cases that are associated with the user stories. So just like by looking at the Agile board, I can see the status immediately of the requirements in terms of testing. So I can see that these are all done because the tests are all complete and they are all passing. I can see that this one here is not okay, and this means that some of the tests is still failing. Okay, and of course I can still I can see this one also, and this is displaying uncovered because I do not have any tests associated with this requirement. So let's create a new user story here in our board. So let's just choose the story issue type. Let's paste our story definition. So as a visitor, I can manage the bookstore newsletter subscription. So this user story will be also for version 1.0. And we will create the user story. So Xray does not provide any kind of information here. I'm just creating a simple user story here and associating it with my Agile board over here. So as you can see, this is the story over here, the book 55. I can move them to in progress also. And if I go to the user story screen, I can see that the same information regarding the requirement status is displayed here. And it's basically saying that this requirement is uncovered because I don't have any tests associated with it. So let's create a couple of test cases for this user story. And the way to create test cases is just like creating issues in Jira. So you can just select the test case here, and you can create new test cases here in Jira. As we are here, I can explain you also that these are all the issue types that were installed by Xray. So you have the test to define test cases, precondition, test set, test execution, and test plan. Okay, so we'll go through each one of these issue types in just a moment. Okay, so for now, I will cancel this dialog, and because I'll just use this shortcut over here, that it will fill automatically some information for me. And the most important thing is that automatically associates the test that I'm going to create with this user story that I'm in right now. So the book 55 user story will be associated with this test case with the correct issue link type. So this issue link type is also provided by Xray. So let me just copy a definition or the summary for the test case that I have here. I'm going to the test details, or first to the general tab. This general tab contains all the native Jira issue fields that you can see on issues. And then Xray provides these additional tabs that allow you to specify the test details right from here, associate tests with test sets, preconditions, and test plans that you might already have in your environment. Okay. For now, let's start specifying the test case. So as you can see here, we can see the test type fields. And these are the test types that are supported by Xray. You can either have manual tests, and manual tests are composed with a list of test steps. Each step contains an action, a data, and expected result fields. And of course, defining the test steps is really simple. So you just start typing and define each one of the steps to define your test script. Okay. But after that, you have the cucumber test case. And this is to define cucumber tests. Okay. If you don't know what Cucumber is, so Cucumber is just a tool that supports behavior-driven development. Okay, so Cucumber reads executable specifications written in plain text and validates that the software does what those specifications say. Okay, and the specifications will be really placed here on the scenario field. So each scenario is a list of steps for Cucumber to work through. So Cucumber verifies that the software conforms with the specification and then generates a report indicating success or failure for each one of the scenarios and each one of the steps. So in order for Cucumber to understand the scenarios, it must follow some basic syntax rules and these rules or this language is called Gherkin. Okay, so if you define your test specification here in Gherkin, you can start specifying the test right from here. So these are Cucumber tests, and this is just a specification. Then X or a Cucumber can be implemented in a variety of programming languages such as Ruby, Python, Java, C# or JavaScript. So you can pretty much use your language that you're using right now to implement these test cases. Okay, so a Cucumber test case is composed by two different parts. One of the first part is this is the part that you see here is the test specification. And then you have another part that is really code that will implement this specification and will execute the specification that we have here. And that code part must be stored elsewhere, perhaps in your code repository. And then these parts must be merged together in order for Cucumber to execute the test cases. So we'll see an example of this later, more in detail, okay? The last type that we have here is the generic test type. And generic test types can serve both as automated tests and manual tests. So let's say that you have currently some automated tests that are not really implemented using Cucumber. So something like Selenium tests that run with JUnit, for instance, in your continuous integration environment, and you just need to import the execution results into Jira. So what Xray does is basically creates automatically test cases that will be generic to map to your external test cases. And this is done all automatically. So you can just create the test manually from here, and you call it the generic test. But if the test does not exist and you are trying to import execution results that are automated execution results into Xray, Xray will provision the test cases automatically. So it will create the test cases that will be generic. And on the generic test definition, you'll just see an ID that allows you to identify your external test case. So this will just be for mapping a test issue in Jira with an external test issue that you probably have in Selenium or using any other technology for implementing test cases. Okay. Of course, you can also have, or you can also execute the generic test case as a manual test case. So because this is just an open text field, you can just create a new test type here called, for instance, an exploratory test, and then use that test case to test a specific area of your software. And then the results, you can also create executions for generic tests and store execution results, including defects and so on. Okay, so this is basically the idea with generic tests. They can be either manual or automated. And if they are automated, if you are not using Cucumber, all the execution results will be imported into generic test cases. Okay. For our demo today, we'll just be implementing both manual and Cucumber test cases. So let's choose the Cucumber test type, because this is the first example that we'll create, and let's leave the scenario empty for now, and let's create another test case. So the first test case was created, and then I can also create a test case that will test users can unsubscribe to the newsletter. Okay, and this time it will be a manual test case, and I'll also leave this definition as empty, and it will be associated with the user story as we see here. So after creating the test cases, if we close the dialog here, as you can see, the test cases are now associated with the user story, because we have created two issue links to the user story, as you can see here. And Xray, of course, detects these issue links and displays the test cases over here. So right now, the requirement status is changed from uncovered to not run, because we already have some tests covering the user story, but they do not have executions yet. So this is why it's displaying not run. As you notice also here on this web panel, you can calculate the status for a requirement in terms of testing for different scopes. So you can either choose a version or you can either choose a test plan, or you can just leave none, and this will consider the latest execution possible for the test executions. Okay. You can also calculate the status for different environments. So let's say that the same test case needs to test 2 different browsers. So let's say that you need to test in Firefox and in Chrome. So you can just execute the same test case into different environments using different test executions, as we'll see later. And then you can just analyze the status for a specific environment. Or if you choose all environments, Xray will aggregate all the results. So if one of the environments is failing and the other is passing, the test will display failed here because one of the environments is failing also. So let's now navigate to the test cases that were created. And we'll start with the manual test case. So test visitors can unsubscribe from the bookstore newsletter. So as you can see, we have the test type that was already filled, and we can see here that on the test details web panel that we can specify the manual test steps. So instead of specifying the test steps over here, I'm just going to import some file that I have here. I have the test steps in a CSV file. Just going to choose my file over here and import the specification here into this test case. So this is the specification or the test script that I need to execute in order to assert that users can unsubscribe to the newsletter. I can also import test steps from a different test case, from JSON files, and also from clipboard. So let's say that you have currently your test steps defined in Excel file. You just go to the Excel file, copy and paste them here directly, and you choose the format. You only have the step, you have the step and result, and step data and result, and then you just import the steps, and Xray will do all the magic for you. So it will detect the format and import the test steps here. It is also possible to export these test steps to CSV files. Right here within the test steps, it's also possible to add attachments. So let's say that the user needs to see some kind of a screenshot in order to execute a specific step. You can just add the attachment here, and the attachment will be presented afterwards on the execution screen. So a test case is just like a template. It can be executed multiple times, and these executions will be instantiated using test execution issues. They will talk in just a moment. Okay, so as you can see a test case just like a definition of a test case that can have multiple executions, and these executions you can see them later on here on the test run section. The following section that you can see here is the precondition section. So it is possible to associate one or more preconditions with this test case. So a precondition is something that abstracts some common behavior to multiple test cases. So you can just create a precondition as a separate issue and then associate that same precondition with multiple test cases. So this is perhaps to prepare an environment or to assert that the test can be executed without any problem. So instead of creating a new precondition issue, I have one precondition already created here. That is just for making sure that the user is subscribed to the newsletter. So I cannot test if the user can unsubscribe if he is not subscribed. So this is our only precondition here for this test case. And I can see the definition from the precondition over here. Afterwards, we can see the test sets web panel. And this just displays a list of test set issues here. So let's create a new test set. And this test set will be called subscription. And this will contain all the tests that we are going to create today. So we will have the manual test and the cucumber test together on the same test set. So this was the test set created. And a test set is just like a list of tests. It's just like a folder of test cases that you can use to organize test cases in your Jira environment. And of course, this order here is important. So this order will be respected when starting an execution from a test set. associating a test set with a test plan, and so on. Okay. So let's go back to the to the manual test case. As you can see, the test case is already associated with the test plan. Before talking about test plans and test runs, let's now go back to our cucumber test. So we are now on the cucumber test, and this test is to test that visitors can subscribe to the bookstore newsletter. And here you can see the test type that we all have already chosen when creating the test issue. And you can see the scenario. So this is something specific of Cucumber. You can even have a scenario or a scenario outline. I will not go into much detail regarding this scenario type. And then you can start adding the scenario steps right here. So you just click add, and you can start specifying here your test case. So Xray also has the concept of an automation test library or step library. And this includes all the steps that were created previously within your Jira instance. So you can just start typing for a test step, and you can choose one of the test steps that have been implemented already, because most probably these test steps can be reused for other test cases. Okay, or you can just go and copy and paste the definition from the test case. So I have the definition here. I can just copy and paste the definition here. And so this is the definition for our test case. Okay. So we kind of have a problem here. So most users would like to store the definitions also on the code repository, besides the code that really implements the scenarios with Cucumber. Okay, so we must only have a single source of truth. Okay, you either consider the definition that is in Jira the most up-to-date, or you consider the definition that is on your code repository the most up-to-date for that test case. Okay, so I will show you a way how you can basically use your code repository to synchronize the features that are there directly with the Jira installation. So right now, I will remove these steps and press cancel, and I'll leave the steps empty because my source of truth will be the code repository and the feature that we'll be implementing in a moment. Okay, so for now, there is just a test case created, and the test case is associated here with the user story. Okay, but you'll see later how you can update the test steps directly from the implementation. Of course, Cucumber tests can also have preconditions, and these will be mapped directly to background clauses in Cucumber tests. So I can just show you an example of a Cucumber test over here. Of course, I have my feature that will be mapped to the user story in our case. So this is really the requirement that is being tested. Then the background will be mapped to the precondition, and then each scenario is basically a test case. So this is how Xray maps directly the Cucumber feature files. Okay, so each scenario is considered a test case, a background, a precondition. Okay. So for now, I'll leave this precondition empty because our test case does not need to have any precondition or any background at the moment. So before executing the test cases, I'll just show you how you can organize the test cases using a different feature here called the Xray test repository. So each project where you have test cases contains automatically a test repository where you can organize the tests in this hierarchical view. Okay, so you can just create folders, you can expand folders, and you can just drag and drop test cases from one folder to the other. Okay, and organize the test cases in a tree-like view. Okay, so we provide this feature because most often people are used to organize test cases using this hierarchical view, and Jira does not provide this view by default. So here you have it. So you have the test repository, and that allows you to create new folders, organize folders, drag and drop, see the tests that are orphans over here. So we can just come here and create a new folder for our subscription tests, and then can just come here and drag and drop the orphans to our subscription folder. So here you have it. You can just organize the test cases using the test case repository. So this works in conjunction with test sets. So these are just two different ways to organize test issues in Jira. So you can have this kind of organization, and then you can have also organization into test sets, and you can even come here, press the right button on your mouse and create a test set for these tests, create a test plan, start an execution, and so on. Okay. So let's now talk a little bit about test plans. So let's say that you are now, you have defined the new test cases, you have defined the new user story and the test cases for it. You are now ready to execute the test cases. As you can see, we are also using a test plan issue over here. And a test plan allows you to do two different things, okay? Basically has two different goals. So the first goal is to define your test campaign or the scope for your current test campaign. So my test campaign currently is version 1.0. I need to release this new version from my software. So I created the test plan that basically contains all the test cases that I need to test for this specific version. Okay. And because I have created two test cases today, and this is my test plan and the status of the test plan that I have right now, I can add, I'm going to add the test set that I have created. And this will just add the two test cases that we have created today into the test plan for me to follow and to see the results. So this is the first goal, to define the scope of your test campaign. The second goal is to always display the latest execution results for the test cases that you have here, no matter how many executions do you have for each one of them. So let's say that you can see that we have already one failing test here. So of course this test needs to be fixed. The issue needs to go back to development. The developer fixes the bug, and now we can execute the same test case again without losing any of the previous executions. Okay, so you just create a new execution with the context of this test plan issue, and then come to the test plan and see the latest execution result for each one of the tests. Okay, so this is the second goal of a test plan. It displays and calculates always the latest execution result for each one of the test cases. So as you can see, we only have one test execution here for our test plan, and this test execution has already passed most of the tests and one of them is failing. But right now we still need to execute these two new test cases over here. Before executing the test cases, I will also talk about the test plan board. So as you can see here with this button over here, clicking this button will take us to the test plan board also provided by Xray. Okay, so this is another view very similar to the test repository where you can organize your test cases in a hierarchy. So you can just create folders, organize folders, create subfolders, and organize the test cases. But the test cases that are contained on the test plan. So I have a folder called a subscription here. Because I have these two new test cases on my test plan, I'll just drag and drop them here to the subscription folder. And as you can see, this is the status for my test plan, as you can see on the issue. This is the same execution status bar. And for this specific folder, I do not have executions yet. So this is why this status bar for the folder is displaying to do. Okay. So let's now create or execute these two new test cases. So in order to do that, I'm just going to use this shortcut here, and I'm going to create a new test execution issue for all the tests that I have in this folder that are to do. And this will be our test execution for the new test cases that we have that we added today. As you can see, this is already filled with version 1.0 because the test plan is already scoped for version 1.0. And on the test execution details, as you can see, you have some planned dates, and you have the tests that will be added to the test execution, and the test plan will be also associated with this test execution issue. So I've created a test execution issue. If I go to the test execution, as you can see, we have two different test cases to execute on this test execution task. So a test execution is just like a task for you to execute tests. There are two ways that you can assign work with Xray. You can just create a test execution, add all the tests that a specific tester needs to test there, and assign the test execution. So I'm going to assign this test execution to me. So by default, all the test cases will be assigned also to me. Or you can just use a single test execution for all your users and assign each one of the test runs that you have here to a specific user. And this is entirely up to you, okay? So as you can see, our test execution, our task for executing these two tests, both of the tests are still to be executed. So let's start executing the test cases. So this is the manual test case. Let's press this button and press execute. This will take us to the execution page. Okay, within this page, I can set pretty much any kind of detail regarding the execution for this test case. And we call really this the test run. So the test run is really a pair between the test issue and the test execution that contains all the execution results. So a test run is really an execution of a test case. So as you can see, you have some breadcrumbs where you can navigate to the project, test plan, test execution, and test issues. As you can see, the summary for the test issue here. And then because a list or a test execution is an ordered list of test cases, you can go to the next and previous tests on the same test execution. So let's keep it here on the manual test case. As you can see, the execution status is still to do, have start and finish dates, and some information about the test execution issue. So the test environments, the revision, and version. Now you can see these three panels over here. So the comments, the defects, and the evidence. So you can specify comments here. You can create defects. Okay, let's say that we find a bug. You can create a defect from here. And you can attach any kind of file. So let's take a screenshot here using my favorite tool for screenshots and paste directly the screenshot into the execution screen. And this will upload the screenshot as evidence to the execution. Okay. These three panels that you can see here, you can set this information in two contexts. So the first context is on the overall execution page here. And the second context is on each one of the test steps below. So you can see in each test step, you can also have the comments, defects, and evidence. So this is because sometimes you find a bug that is not really related with any of the test steps here. You can just create a bug from here. Else you can create the bug directly on the test step. So below these three panels, you can see the execution details. So this will contain some information that was copied basically from the test issue so that you do not have to go back and forward to the execution screen and to the test issue screen to see this information. So as you can see that we have a link for the user story here, the test description, and so on. Then you can see the preconditions. If this precondition is failing for some reason, you can just fail the test from here. If the precondition is passing, you can start executing each one of the test steps. So let's imagine that the last test step is failing. So we fail the test step. We can create a defect also for this particular step. Okay, and notice when creating a defect for a test step, Xray includes already some information populated for you. So all the test steps from the tests until the test step that failed are included on the test steps on the description of the bug. So users can just follow these steps and immediately reproduce the bug that was created. So let's see here the bug that was created. Okay, we can see the table here. You can see that the effects version was copied from the test execution. And of course, you can also see that some links are automatically created to either the test execution issue, the test issue, and also the requirement issue. So these are just configurations. You can go to the Xray configurations and enable or disable these issue links over here. Going back to the execution screen. So when you reach a final status here on the test steps, the overall execution status is automatically updated. So this test is failing because we have one failing test step. The last web panel presented here on the execution page contains the activity. So all the actions that were performed by the user here on the execution page, you can see them here. So we have finished executing this test case. If we go back to the test execution issue, as you can see, our test execution contains already some information. So we have one failing test case and the other is still to be executed. So let's take a look at the other test case. So the other test case is the cucumber test case. Although this is an automated test case and it is meant to be executed outside of Jira, so it's not the responsibility of Jira or Xray to execute the automated tests. Okay, so these need to be executed by a continuous integration platform, and the result can be later imported automatically using the Xray REST API. So this is the idea with automated tests, but you can import the execution results to have all the information regarding testing centralized in Jira. And of course, display the requirement coverage information reflected on the requirement issues such as users and epics. Although this is an automated test, it's still possible to execute it as it was a manual test. Because sometimes you have the specification, the cucumber specification part, but the implementation part is not really complete, or there is a problem with the implementation. You can just execute the test manually from here, because the scenario will be displayed here also. So one of the advantages of a cucumber test is that it's just plain English, so users can just read the specification and execute the test manually. So as you can see, our test specification is still empty because we do not have executed or even created the test case. Okay, so let's do that right now. So I'm going to go back to the test execution and I'll remove this test case from the test execution, as we'll not use this test execution to execute the cucumber test, because we are just going to make our definition, create our definition, push our code to our code repository, and the continuous integration tool will basically do the rest. So we have a process of updating and synchronizing the feature files also to Jira issues. So this will create and update the test definition and also execute the test case. And this will create a new test execution that we have configured to be associated with the same test plan. So we do not lose the scope that we are here on this demo. So let's now go back then to the code that we have here. So we have the implementation already prepared here. So this is the implementation for our feature. So we have here our scenario with the implementation. Okay, so these are the steps. The steps are already implemented, in my case, in Ruby. So I have this implementation complete already. So the only thing to do left to do is to I'm going to go back here to the test case. I'm just going to copy this definition here. So this is the test case. So this is how Xray will map this feature definition to an issue in Jira. So you have these have to have these tags automatically here. And I can also say that this feature is linked with a specific user story or a specific requirement. Okay, so This is not mandatory because the first time that you import this subscription.feature file, Xray will automatically create the test case if it's not present yet in Jira. So because I have created the test case already, and I need to update the same test case to match all the things that we have done in this demo today, I'll just tag it with the test issue key that I have. So we are now ready. Let's commit our file over here. So we'll add the changes and we'll commit the feature file and we push the changes to our repository. Okay, so the new feature was committed. Okay, and right now I'm going to explain you the process that we have. So we are currently using a GitLab over here as our continuous integration platform. As you can see, a new job or a new pipeline is already running. And this pipeline is composed of two different phases. Okay, so I can show you the implementation. This is a very simple implementation that I have done here. So the first stage is the sync features stage, and the second stage is the test stage. So on the first stage that you can see here, we are just synchronizing all the features that were present on the commits that we did and synchronize them automatically with Jira using the Xray endpoint to import Cucumber features. So I'm just taking all the features from my commit and then producing a zip with all the features and then uploading the features into Xray. And of course, this will provision automatically the test cases. We'll link them automatically to user stories if we have that configuration correct, and so on. Okay, so this is our first stage. So it will detect a new feature here, and it will basically update our test definition in Jira. So we can check that has been completed the first stage, at least here. So you should be able to see the definition right here. So here you have it. So you can see the scenario that was really synchronized from the build directly. So the users, our single source of truth right now is GitHub or GitLab in this case. Okay, so I have the code there. I've just committed the new feature. I've committed the new feature containing the link to the test case and to the user story, and Xray will pretty much do the rest and link all the information together. Okay. And then the second stage that I'm about to show you right now, the second stage is to really execute the Cucumber test. So just committed the feature. If there are feature files, Cucumber feature files committed, I will try to execute them. So I will download the feature files again. So this is not a mandatory step because I have the feature files already from our site. But even though I have them, I'll go to the Jira installation. I'll use the Xray REST API again, extract all the feature files that I have in my commit, unzip the feature files, execute the feature files with Cucumber, and this will basically execute the test cases and produce this data.json output report. And this is the report that really contains which scenarios are passing and failing and which steps are passing and failing and so on. And then I'm just uploading all this information into Xray. So Xray will recognize, of course, the Cucumber reports and updates and create a new test execution and will associate the test execution with the existing test plan. So as you can see, the build has already passed. Let's go back to Jira. Let's go back to our test plan. And as you can see right now, this was the test execution that was created and imported directly from the Xray REST API. Okay, we can go to the test execution. We can see that the executed test was this one. We can even go to the execution screen, and you can see that the scenario executed was this one, and the details from the execution are here. So I have the time or the duration for each one of the steps, and I have the status also for each one of the steps. So our test is passing. If we go back to our test execution, that of course in this case just contains one test, it is also all of the tests are passing. If we go back to our test plan issue, as you can see, we have now 14 tests that are passing, including our cucumber tests that you should be able to see also here. This is our test and it is passing. The only failing tests are these manual tests here. So what we can do right now, so this issue needs to be fixed. Of course, users cannot unsubscribe to newsletters. Of course, this is a pain. So the user needs to, or the developer needs to fix this bug. Let's imagine that he already fixed the bug. So let's create a new test execution just for this test case, just to check if the test case is already passing. So I can create a test execution right from here, choose the assignee and press create. This will create a test execution for a single test. So our manual test that was failing the first time. As you can see, we have, of course, one requirement associated with the test case, and we already have two defects because those were the defects that were open on the first execution. So let's imagine that right now the problem is fixed. I don't need to go to the execution screen. I can execute just the test inline from here. And then the test is passing. If we go back to the test plan, as you can see, all of our tests are passing except the one test issue that was failing. If we go back to our test plan board, you should see exactly the same information. So our subscription tests are all passing. If we go back to our agile board, we can also see that our user story is already passing. So most probably the QA team was working on this user story, and because the tests are passing, I can just close the user story and solve this issue. So we have completed the implementation of our feature. If we go here to the feature file or to the user story, you can see that both of our tests are passing because the latest execution result is passed for these test cases. And you can see all of that information right from here, from within the user story. So right now, I'll talk just a little bit about the reporting capabilities that Xray provides. So Xray reports can be just accessed from here. You can just go to the Xray reports button over here. And within this page, you can access pretty much all the reports that Xray can offer. So the first report that you can see here is the overall requirement coverage report. So in terms of Xray reports, you have basically two ways of analyzing the information. So you can see the status of user stories or epics, or what we call requirements, okay, and see the status of the requirements directly. Or you can just look at the testing artifacts and see if the tests are passing, all of the test plans are passing, and so on. So these are just two ways of analyzing a project. So perhaps if you are doing regression tests, you don't have new user stories to test, right? So you just create a test plan, put all the tests for regression tests over there, and just look at the status of a test plan regarding regression tests. So you have reports for seeing the status of user stories or requirements, and you have reports for seeing status of the testing artifacts. So, and this here is a report for seeing the status of the user stories in your project. So I'm filtering here. I do not have any filter here, and this means I'm considering all the user stories in my project, all the requirements. And this is the scope that I'm calculating the status. So I can calculate, if you remember, by different versions, and calculate for a specific test plan, and all of this for specific environments. So I'll just leave the scope empty, considering the latest execution for now. So as you can see, we have 6 requirements that are okay. One of them is not okay. You can just click here and drill down to a table to see why is this requirement not okay. So I can see this is an epic because it contains user stories below, and you can see exactly why is it failing. So I can see that one of the user stories has one test that is failing, and this is why this epic is failing. Within this report, it is also possible to group by other fields. So by priority of your requirement issues, or by status, or by resolution, and so on, or even by components. Okay, so this can be useful to see the status of your project in terms of testing. The next report is the history requirement coverage report. It displays the same information, but within a period of time. Okay, I can generate the report, and within the period of time, I can see that each one of these bars represents a different day, and within each day, I can see the status of my requirements. So I should be able to extrapolate some behavior or the date when all the tests will be complete. Okay. Then we have the traceability report. So you can also filter the requirements from here, and this report is also based on requirements. We have the same status or the same scope field over here in terms of the calculation, and then you can generate a report. So this report is very similar to the overall coverage, but it contains much more detailed information. So for each requirement, you can see how many tests are associated, how many executions were done for each test, and how many defects were created. Then you can look directly at testing entities provided by Xray. So we are looking at the report that displays the test plan metrics for our project. So I currently have only one test plan here on this project. I can see for each test plan, I can group tests by status, tests by test type, success rate by environment, open defects, and of course, all of these reports can be exported into CSV files. We have also the test executions report. Contains the same kind of report, but in terms of test execution issues, test execution tasks. And then you have the test runs report. So if you remember, a test run is an execution of a test case. So I can just, for instance, filter, give me all the executions for a specific user, see its work, and then I can export this report and see all the details regarding the execution here. Then some of these reports can also be used as gadgets for your dashboard. So I'm going to show you just a couple of examples here. So as you can see, the overall requirement coverage for the user stories. You can see the overall test results also. This is based on test cases. Okay, so you can see the daily history here as well. You can see the test evolution. So we have created a couple of test cases today, and you can see the status of the test cases for a period of time. You can group test runs by, for instance, components here and see the status of the test runs directly. And because Xray just uses custom fields, you can use custom fields to configure your agile boards. You can just go to the issue search and just do a search and include some of the fields that are provided here by Xray. And you can see that you have the test run status that displays the latest execution status for test cases and so on. Okay. So right now, the only thing left to talk about is about integrations in Xray. So I'm first going to talk about the integration we have with Exporter. So like Lisa said in the beginning, Exporter is just a tool for your Jira instance that, of course, is not only for test management. Okay, so with Exporter, you can just export any kind of issue information from Jira and produce your own customized report. And this report can be created, or this template can be created with Word documents or Excel documents. Just put the placeholders there, create your template report in Word, upload that template into Exporter in Jira, and then use that template to export any kind of issue sorry, information. So I have a test case here. I can just choose the Xray test report, choose the output format, PDF in my case, and just output the information from the test case. So as you can see, of course, you can access the preconditions, the last status of the execution, links for requirements, description, test procedure, and so on. So any kind of information that you can see in Jira, so regarding even if they are native fields, custom fields, or even we have custom integrations with other add-ons regarding Exporter, So you can just use Exporter to extract any kind of issue information from Jira. And of course, we have a tight integration with Xray. So Exporter and Xray work very well together. If you like to produce a test report to send to someone that doesn't have access to Jira, just use Exporter to do that. Another very interesting integration is regarding structure. So we also have an integration with structure. Besides providing our own test repository where you can organize the test cases, because of course you can also produce a board here with structure that will display, for instance, the test cases that are associated with the test plan, the tests that are associated with user stories, and so on. So you can have this hierarchy, and you can also have some custom fields here of Xray displaying the status of these entities.